Modern technology, I don't know. Problem, I guess, when you don't do this every week. Didn't want to cooperate. Unfortunately, I should have been changing chuck jaws while I was screwing around doing other things, but I'll do this quick. I'll work on some projects of more this time of year. Just a simple little lantern, something that I made last year, a bunch of. Had high hopes for them in the craft show season, and they did not do very well. But so far this year, I think I had five left, something like that, and I sold three out of the five. So I guess we're gonna have to make a couple more, maybe. I'm also doing this as a class at my local woodcraft store. I figured I'd use this as a bit of a refresher to make sure I remembered how to make them. Not a very difficult project to make. There is a little bit of kind of a little combination kind of a project, a little bit of woodworking involved because you need to start out with a nice square blank so you can lay them out and get holes drilled very precisely. Because if you don't, you end up with some unevenness. Not everybody can see, but the important one can see it, and that's me. So it's not going to leave my shop when it's not right. At least to my satisfaction. So I just switched back from the shark jaws because this material is smaller. It's actually starting out at about 1.75 inches square. Where the shark jaws, that's going to be kind of the minimum sort of what they'll grab. So it's a little difficult to go from, excuse me, the 1.75 inches and still have enough material left for a tenant. Let me see that I don't have a camera on. I don't think it should be that one. There's moon. No, no. I'm not gonna mess with that. I was working on recording some YouTube videos the last couple weeks, so I know I have certain things turned off and not turned on or whatever. Like most of this kind of stuff, it is sort of a it is a spindle project. So we're gonna mark centers, see how square I really got this block. I go around all four corners hopefully just end up with a little bit of a fat line in the middle, which is pretty much what it is. Try and get it as accurate as I can. A little bit won't necessarily kill you, a lot will. And I think I can get away with 1 3/4 material, but once again, that'll remain to be seen. And start between centers. The whole thing will be done between centers. I'll use that in there. And we're working more and more with getting better with the skew, so most of this stuff I've been roughing down, at least roughing down, if not more, with the skew. Just so that I make sure I use it more and more often. It's like everything else, the more you use it, the better you'll get with it. The tool rest is above center, somewhere thereabouts. Could even maybe a tad higher. Like everything else, we'll start out nice and slow, bring the speed up, be able to run this pretty much at whatever speed I want to run. It is a very small piece. You basically want this just to the round. Be careful when you go over them holes, because it cuts much quicker, much easier across them holes than it does everywhere else. Not quite there yet. We're getting close though. Just about there on the end. Still got tiny little flats. This is kind of the hard part about doing them with the thinner material, is it because I got to drill an 1 3/8 hole in the end of this. A little T-like to go in. So I can't afford to lose a bunch of material or excess material down there. And we're pretty close. Still not quite there. A little bit. Famous last words are one more little pass across there. Top part really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Doesn't have to be perfectly square or perfectly round, it's not square. So we're going to give us a little pennant down here. do that just as easily with the skew as you can anything else. You need to clean up this end a bit. Once again, we don't have to go the whole way in there either. Sharp corner, get rid of. Just barely. I don't want to take a lot off of that corner. We didn't get quite the whole way in there either. Do need this end to be true. I could wait and do it once I put it in the chuck. It would be just as easy. All little razor blades. A little bit of flats there. Feels like there could be a tiny bit there, but that's okay. Like I say, we can't lose a bunch of material at that end, or we'll be in trouble. Normally try and, I think when I made these before, I try and get the material that would be sort of a solid 2 inches thick when I have everything screwed up. A little smaller diameter just sort of makes it maybe a little bit more of a challenge. You can always have some challenge in life. And it could have been smaller. I don't really necessarily, not really concerned about that. I don't need, it's not like I'm doing something big on it, so I don't need to have super grip of getting it down to a circle, which would be the best grip we could get with our chuck. So, 1 3/8. The one. Oh, that's right. Now it's coming back to me. I pre-drill holes, or did pre-drill holes. Gotta find that really ugly drill bit. It's a little bit. You could drill this hole strictly using the 1 3/8 drill Forstner drill bit, but when I would do that, it works the big drill bit really hard to go through because you're drilling straight in, strictly straight into end grain. So I found I have this, I don't know, it's like maybe a 3/4, 7/8 inch twist drill bit. So I'll run that in, at least get through. I don't need to go the whole way through the top, although I think when I did these before, I think I did use that. And go the whole way through and drill a little bit up into the top. I think I went in just to about up into there where about the flutes would be touching on the drill bit. Just relieves some material and helps the 1 3/8 drill bit make things a little bit easier. So bring that up close, nice and close. You don't have quill sticking out because I do have to drill pretty long. That's kind of the hard part of doing these in the class. I did this class last year once. This was the part I had to really watch what people were doing. On a full-size lathe, I have plenty of quill to reach out that far, but when you're dealing with the small jet lathe, even in mine, I really don't have the squeal to go with it. I'm going to drill just so I get about another eighth of an inch or something above the opening. And then that should be it as I rearrange the camera. Okay, we'll have to reset that one anyhow. I think you'll be able to see. See, we don't have much. This might actually be a failure right off the bat because we don't have enough room. Probably not going to have enough room on this. So we got to put that. We got to open that up to get that little guy in there. Okay. I'm going to rearrange the camera. Actually, need to keep that. So now we should be able to go over to there. So you got to open this up to get this tea light in there. And they're actually pretty good size. So, weapon of choice would be a square end scraper, or there. I sort of made a scraper in some ways to actually just do this job. It's rather than just traditional square end scraper, it has a radius going from that point over to there, strictly over to there. It's also ground a little bit off on the side, so I can be a little closer to the center line when I cut with it. It sounded like a good idea at the time, but if I had to make that one over again, I would not grind the side because this is one of the tools. I do take this along and let the people use it in the class, so it becomes a bit of an issue because it is a cutting edge over here as well on the side. So if they pull to the side with it, then they can open up that hole too quickly and too much. So I'm going to cut just a, in this case I can go just above center. If it was a traditional square end, I'd have to go higher yet. That also relieves some of the material on the side. So here's where we'll figure out whether we're going to get one out of this or not. And of course these tea lights, as they always would go, are tapered. They're fatter down here than they are at the top. So not only do you got to get them in there where they belong, but it has to be a tapered hole. Not that it would matter if it's not truly tapered. They also have to be deep enough. And as you can hear, it wants to squeal. So we're really close. Don't push it too hard in there, it won't come back out. It looks like my taper is about right. I just need to go a little bit deeper, a little bit straighter further up. Something along those lines. There we go. And we should go further up. Can't really show you on camera. I got probably a quarter of an inch before it gets to this hole in there. So I want to push that forward a little bit more. I think it looks nicer if the flame, I guess you want to consider it, would be sticking out above. Sticking out in the holes where you can actually see them. I don't have enough out up there. Where we got dirt in there. All the above. Not necessarily looking for the perfect fit, because there's going to be, you're going to glue these in when you're done. So that's actually a really snug fit. Maybe a little too snug. You just take just a teeny tiny little bit. The hardest thing to do is to take the teeny tiny little bit. And see, 1 3/4 inches, we're down to probably 3/16 of an inch out there. So that should work. The light will be just above where we want it to be. I think that'll work. And what I did with them before, this is some, I think this is elm. I think was wood that I determined this was. So it didn't necessarily scrape overly well in there. So just a little bit of sanding. I'm going to sneak up in behind that and get rid of the fuzzies. There's not a real big lip up there. Like I say, because we don't have a lot of material to play with. It's also probably where it's tight at. Yes, it's not going up where I want it to go. Probably the most time consuming part of the whole project. There we go. Now I'm happy with that. So that part's done. Now what I had did with these before, when I made them, we'll have to do that first. I use my beading tools. I'm too lazy to turn think I used the big one. 1, 2, 3, yeah. But I think where I'm going to be in trouble, leave them both out. On this one, is that when that forms full bead, I'm going to be just about through to the other side. Where this one is going to have a little bit of material left. Still not going to have much. All they can do is try it. It's only a little piece of wood. I got to work out here on the end of the tool rest. Because these want to go strictly overhead will look better. Even bring it in a bit. These work better when they're down at a pretty substantial angle down. So 1, 2, 3. Well, let's see what it looks like. So when you use these, you mark them. I know what I could do. I need some support there. So I have to go to the short tool rest. Probably go off the other side of it. Maybe. Close there. Yeah. And give it some, bring the live center back up so that has support out there on the end, because it's, as you can hear, it wants to squeal. So that's telling you, once again, your ears are your best defense on all this stuff. So it's telling me that it doesn't like it out there because there's nothing holding it. So if we just bring our live center up, just to go inside of it, give it just a little bit of support. Now, we have enough out of the road. One more change. If I knew where that one is at. I have one that's a round bar. For some reason it's not in the drawer where it belongs. Interesting. Very interesting. And it should be here with the rest of them, and it's not. But we go super long. You can do that. That should actually work. Bring it up a bit. This wants to be not that high. Actually, has to be down pretty low in order to accomplish what I want to accomplish with it, which is up in there. Be nice if it, I do have a stop collar on it, so get down to that. It's actually set for a, there we go, that'll be better. Closer to center. plenty of speed. So that's 1, 2, 3, and close to that hole. And we go 4. Yes, I normally use the bigger one that would be actually just 3. These little guys just wiggling back and forth till you get to a circle. Lift up a little bit. Actually easier. We take the 2 seconds out and put a little black line down to about the middle so that we see that disappear. Once the line disappears, we know we're down to a circle. And I'll lift the handle a little bit, and the last thing it does is do sort of a little scrape cut. I think this first one's actually down to a circle. It is now. Usually, if the wood cooperates, it actually looks like it could go down just a little bit more. And see just a tiny bit of pencil line left on 2 of them. Not that that would be the end of the world, but I don't really want to flat on the bead. Might actually look a whole lot more. It actually might look more interesting yet because of that. Kind of a pain to do it that way, but okay, we're about 3/8 of an inch. What I want to do is I want to keep them symmetrical. So if I come up to 3/8 of an inch there on the top side, we'll mark a line. We'll cut one more bead, which will be underneath the roof of the hat. That should take care of that. Okay, one other thing I didn't. A lot of times I bring a hollowing tool and come in here and do a little bit of removal there, but I don't necessarily think I'm going to because it's already so thin in there to start with. I don't think that would be a wise choice. I will sneak in there a little bit with a piece of sandpaper and take care of take care of it that way. I think we just use a short rest. We'll do this work with the skew again. Don't need to do this with the skew, but it's like I say, it's a good practice. Look at one other thing before I go too far. That's definitely not a whole lot of material left in there, especially on these first 2 down here. I'd say you'd be lucky if there's a 1/16 of an inch left in there. I think I'm going to do one simple little thing before I move on. Because I'm going to continue to remove some more material. I want to round this bottom corner over. nice and uniform-like. Gotta work. Now I can bring my tailstock back up. Tiny bit of pressure. Don't want much because I don't want it. I don't want to try and squeeze it together. I just want it to sit there where it belongs. Once again, it would be advantageous. Pretty big words, but it would be to our best interest to have a center line. This says I had to pick the one that has such small numbers on it. So 1 3/4 or so, about 7/8 the center. Somewhere thereabouts. There's two lines I should be able to see when it's spinning. Of course, right about here's where you could actually blow this thing up very quickly. Any misstep in this part, and it's going to be in trouble. I'm going to round that down first. The last thing I'll do is go back to the very center. If I get it in there too far, I come back down from the top. Step back and look. I think we'll get the other side where it belongs first. Run fuzzy, drop off of there so you can see what I'm doing. Thank you. So you can see the line directly in the center, so I want to get rid of that. So go beyond the line. Try and make this a little bit more of a curve. And into that corner. Probably on both sides a little bit. Not perfectly round, but I'm also looking at what material I have left. Like I said, when you go down, I have another one. I'll probably do the other one as well while I'm doing this tonight. And that one is probably a solid 2 inches thick. This size, though, if you can handle um, the extra pressure, so to speak, of doing it that way, it'll make a much smaller, much lighter in weight. Because I mean, they are supposed to be an ornament. Doesn't quite have the curve that I would like it to have. Like I said, I don't have a ton of material to play with. I really don't want the flat in the middle. I think we're going to live with it at that. Yes, that'll work. Okay, one other thing I need to do with the skew. Now when you're doing that cut, the tool rest becomes too high, at least for me. Just want to cut a chamfer right straight down into that corner. Nice clean, crisp chamfer. Could be maybe a little bit more of an angle. One of the places the skew does shine is to do things like that with it. It's very, not saying you can't have a catch with it doing things like that. You certainly can. But it is very forgiving for that. It does a very precise cut that's clean, clean as you're ever going to get. Would be no sanding involved in such a thing as that. Which right now, I think we're actually going to sand that part. I haven't quite decided whether I'm going to dye these here. I'm going to need a strip of cloth back sandpaper too. Because there's really only one way to get in here and sand in these little areas. Is to try and get your fat fingers to get sandpaper through there. And you can knock these corners off. You're really knocking the corners off in there. Just so that if somebody sticks their finger in there, which some little kid or whatever is going to, that they're not like little razor blades sticking up at you. Not that you couldn't go in there and do some of that sort of after the fact, but some of these projects sort of require you to do things in that sequence. Here's one of them. You probably really can't see in there, but there's a tiny little bit of a dip in there yet on the inside, which tells me that I was a little bit off on my drilling, or at least a little bit off on when I mark the centers, and you end up with a little bit of variation. The variation you wouldn't see if this was thick enough. I would have went in there a little bit with a hollowing tool. The other place they will show up out here is right there. That one is thinner than the other three, which is what I figured it would be. So somewhere along the line, one of those little variables is off by a little bit. Average person would never see it. But as the maker, I know that it's there. So when we do our sanding, we're going to be a light pressure. Since we also cut all that with the skew, there is not a whole lot of sanding on that. So I started with 220. We'll go 220, 320, and 400 for something like this. I normally would sand something like this at about 500 or 600 RPMs. In this case, with the hole in there, I'm sanding at about 800. Just helps you from putting too much pressure in there and managing to go inside of one of the holes. I think it would be pretty hard to do, but if something is possible, it can always happen. Use the cut edge of the sandpaper into that corner. Touch the tops of the beads a little bit. Unless the material is something that the beading cutters don't like, they cut smooth enough and clean enough that there's really very little sanding to do. Just sand this a little bit down here on the end. Make sure I have nothing in there that I don't like. The other sort of thing that you have to do is come back out here on the outside edge, which you can do that at any given point. We're going to have to break all those corners because those corners are very, very sharp right now. Sharp enough to cut your fingers. I just want to break them. I don't want a big round over on them. That's pretty much about it. I could go back and usually with this kind of stuff, I usually go back and feel things as when I go to finish them up and make sure I could even sand the inside of those holes a little bit. That was drilled with a Forstner bit, so they're not necessarily as smooth as they could be. But all that you could do sort of as a final sort of episode of what you would do before you take it off. We're going to do some of the shaping up here before we take it off and flip it around. And that will be done with the bowl gouge and the spindle gouge. Bowl gouge is probably one of my favorite tools to use. I use it probably more than anything else. You could strictly do this with a spindle gouge as well. Just enough pressure on it to make sure that it's not going to run away. This will be the top of it. So the more we can remove now, the better off we will be. Do the finesse part with the spindle gouge. I want this to go in. It'll be sort of a fairly shallow cove. Get just behind that sharp point. Yeah, we'll get real close to the chuck. But this is the absolute best grip that we're gonna, or best situation to be removing as much of this as we can. Basically, what's left in the chuck will become the little ball on the top. So I want to get all this right, clean as possible. I will even sand this part down here. I want to do as much as I possibly can before I switch it around. Step back and look. I think we could go, it is kind of small, so I think we could go a little thinner than that. Nice slow controlled cut. Right straight into that corner. You can see it's a nice sort of a burnished finish. So you have no torn grain or any such thing as that, which we don't. So once again, we're going to go back and sand. This is mainly end grain. Feels like it's cut very smooth, so I'm going to start at about 320. It'll be just a 320 and 400 for this top part, as long as I don't see any ripples that I left. Also really doing is making sure this surface is nice and smooth and clean. And sand a little bit of that down there once we flip it around. We'll hit it with 400. Like I say, take the time and learn the good tool control. I'll knock this corner off. How are you doing tonight, Billy? I'm just not quite getting that corner knocked off to where I want it. Not really the best idea to touch that while spinning. That's also a good way to figure out whether it's sharp and do the dumb move of slicing your own finger. So that's where we're at so far. Oh, not done too bad. Okay. So this is how I hold them. Back up the tailstock so you can see exactly what it is. You can see that this is a lot of black on here because a lot of times I turn these black and use some green filler on. I also have a little bit of tape on there because there's a little bit more room down here because of doing that top part. So bring the live center back up, the cone live center that I did use earlier, which has a nice sharp point. I just bring it up, a little bit of pressure. You see it actually would spin right there, which is okay because the next sort of thing would be a safety feature. So we'll take a little nice piece of 2-inch wide painter's tape. Anything wrong with using some of the painter's tape on some of this stuff is it can pick up some grain when it releases, although this blue painter's tape seems to do pretty well. So now we're back in between centers. Are we perfectly centered? No, but you would be the only one to know that. because you're the one doing the work. Also don't have quite enough force on there because the live center wasn't spinning very fast. Okay, is it perfectly true? No. We'll keep the speed down a bit on this because we could break it. We'll just make nice little cuts. It'd actually be better if I cut from the bottom to the top. The way I'm putting all the force going towards the headstock rather than across the piece. Takes a little bit of time. A little bit of time and patience. And you see if I get too aggressive with it, or if I get aggressive at all really with it, it wants to bounce around and jump around. And when we have the bouncing and jumping around, eventually something will break. And of course, at this point, we don't really want to break it. There's too much time into the rail. Time and effort, rather. Although, as you can see, these don't take very super long to make. So I want a ball on the top. Create spindle gouge. We can make a nice half a bead going that way. Into the corner. And even leave a little bit of a chamfer in there if you want. Give it a little bit more visual interest, so to speak. Looks like the bead is a bit big for the piece. Make it a little smaller, a little shorter. Yeah, I'm fairly far down there. Looks to me like it's still too big. I'll just flatten it back out, basically, and start over. You gotta go very slow and methodical in something like this, because the lathe is only spinning at about 1200 RPMs now. So down here with this little bit, it's really slow. I guess we like that. I guess it'll live. Here we don't have nothing goofy there. That's why this is all this. That's why I sanded all this first. As you can see, you almost never get this back to where it's perfectly true. So to do the ball, nobody will ever know the difference. So now we should be able to actually break that free, cut that free. See, it's free. I'm going to back out the live center just a little bit because I'm going to use my fingers to support it. I want to cut that last little thing off the end like that. Now I'm actually going to bring the live center back up. I'm going to need a hole in there to start with, just to let it spin. By the looks of it, that didn't necessarily go back to center very well. Like I say, unless you're watching this video, you'll never know the difference. So now we're going to sand that up, our little ball up. And actually can get rid of the tailstock all the way around. We're just sanding, so we're not putting a ton of pressure. So that was 320. And 400. And that should be that. And one last step before I take it off of there. It'll make it easier for me in the long run. Because that gets a little screw eye in the top. And of course, with a very little screw eye, it takes a very little drill bit. So we'll use that. We now have a point marked that's pretty close to center. Close enough. Being held in a little pin vise is what they call them. It's a very small drill bit. And then we'll put our screw eye in there. To get it started, can actually do it under lathe power if your lathe goes slow enough. I'll peel it off. You can see there's some little bits of fiber that pulled out of there. Probably should not have put that. So I shouldn't have put my screw eye in there yet. But I did need to drill the hole while it was there. So bring up just a tiny bit of pressure. And we'll use some, thinking I had some more, oh well. I use some of this foam back sandpaper on this. It'll sort of push down in there a little bit. And just go across the top of them again to get any of them little fiber spots. As you can see how much pressure I have, I can spin that by hand on the mandrel. That mandrel has been well used, as you can imagine. That might have been part of the reason. Shouldn't do that. Keep your mouth shut when you blow something. There was some sawdust and crap up in there. I was gonna say that mandrel should be pretty flat across the end, and it's going into this part up here, up in here, where the Forstner bit is. That twist drill bit gave me a little conical cone up in there. Once again, if you were so minded and really wanted to, really fancy with this and hollow up inside that lid a little bit more, but they don't weigh that much to start with now, especially starting out with that thin of material. The foam back sandpaper is also another good way of like sanding some of this kind of stuff. Face shield down so I don't bang into the camera. So that will allow you to sand these curves, these outside edges, a little bit easier than normal sandpaper even. We just want to make sure everything is clean, smooth, no real razor blade edges left behind. So that one actually would be ready for some finish. Yeah, we might as well. We'll just give this one a clear finish. Let's just bring a tailstock up just to hold it. That's really all it's there for. I probably won't spin this at all, except by hand maybe. So I'll go to my finisher choice, which would be the Parfix 3408, which is this low setting super glue. We'll find out how thin this is, because when I put it on these little grooves up here, which is the absolute easiest way to finish in a groove, is just to put some super glue in there and let gravity help you out, and just puts it right in there. Otherwise, we'll spin it by hand. We got too many sharp places that could very easily smack our fingers pretty hard. I want to get a nice thick coat on now. I want it to be saturated. I'm not going to worry about what's inside them holes at this point. I'll do that after the fact. Once again, we have a sharp groove. So let gravity do its work. Spin it around. Do the top and the ball. Not worried about it touching the live center. It should have enough. I can't say that I've waxed that one lately, but a little bit of wax on things that may come in contact with the super glue goes a long ways, because wax and super glue are not friends. I think we have it saturated well enough. Get rid of the last little bit of the paper tape off. Take that bit off. And we'll open it up, and we're going to dry off the excess. Because we don't want to leave any sitting on the surface. We just want the part that went down into the grain and filled up the grain, filled up the pores of the wood. And it is, just because it's set slowly, and you see me spending all kind of time working with it, doesn't mean it's not super glue. It will still stick your fingers together or stick anything else together that it would come in contact with. Hopefully we don't find out the hard way, because it could have went through the whole way, because they're so thin down there at the bottom. I'm going to activate it about a foot away, a little extra, because we're going to take it off of there. As we knock things on the ground. I'm going to put my screw eye back in. Gives me a place to grab a hold of it without having to grab a hold of the super glue area. No, it didn't. Surprisingly enough, it didn't go the whole way through.
I will let that set up for a little while, and then I'll come back a little bit later and go inside of here. Inside, just pretty much just inside these rings. I had a bright idea that I might probably give it to my wife to do that, but I think they would look kind of neat if you went in on this interior in here and painted it like a silver or a white or something like that, which would make the light really sort of pop out and shine. Don't work well with gloves on. So there we go, our little lantern. The light, this is one of the lights, at least according to what it said when I bought them. It's supposed to stay on for 16 hours and off for 18 hours. So theoretically, if you wanted to use them, you could pick a time of day when maybe you wanted them to be on in the evening or something like that, and turn them on and let them go, and they'll come back on 18 hours later. That's pretty simple, quick and easy, sort of project kind of thing to do. We'll have a little bit more touch up to do as you drop the light on the ground and it comes apart. That's interesting. I don't think they're meant to come apart. That's what you get when they're $1 a piece. I guess they just sort of snap together. It still works, so once everything's dried to my satisfaction and finished to my satisfaction, when I go to put the light in, that's just a little bit of whatever choice you want. Could be a little 5-minute epoxy, which is usually what I do with them. A little bit of 5-minute epoxy. It just seems to be the easiest thing to use. Oh, I know what I was going to work on. Leave that on. I have to make more of these Ikebana things. I think that's what we'll do for the next hour and call it a day. I kind of like to go a little bit lazy on these in some ways. This board has a very big, pretty much of a big cup in it. It's kind of going to be sort of a challenge to even get it relatively close to center. I had been, a lot of times I will take this, and I still might with this one too. I have to look. After watching a bunch of Richard Ruffin, you got to watch these people that have tons of experience and knowledge on making things easier to do, quicker to do, I guess you would say. We could use, I could probably just use my worm screw for that. If I can find it. Not that one. I have one. I have one yet from a couple weeks ago. Get that little guy? Yeah. That I cut off because this is an actual Vic Mark woodworm screw, which when they're new, which I have several more of them because of every time you buy a chuck, it comes with another new one. That's a solid 1/2 inch sticking out there, which should be more than enough to hold a piece of this size. Grab a drill bit or drill a hole. I have a little piece of tape on there. It tells me about how deep it needs to go. We definitely don't want to end up short. We'll spin it on there. Somehow I think I'm going to be cutting my piece of 1/4 inch plywood. You know what? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take that spacer off there. I could just cut it, but I'll also do it very slowly. There we go. That's as far as it wants to go. Still sort of fighting with which drill bit to use for it. Thought that was the right one. The other option is to take the Forstner bit and drill a hole in there, which is kind of an option that I like. After watching what he was doing with it, it doesn't make it very quick and easy, but as badly cupped as what that piece is, would actually be rather difficult to get it to sit flat enough to safely drill it, put it that way. We won't need our live center anymore, because we'll do it strictly with that. I'll need a little longer drill tool rest. I'm going to start by getting rid of at least some of the square corner. Actually, while we're doing it I'm going to do it that way, which is a simple way of doing it. There's no real point in not having the live center there. A little bit of extra protection. As always, we're spinning, starting out slow. Widen things out because we don't have a little itty bitty piece anymore. Cover up some stuff because this will make the chips fly everywhere. Bring it up till it sounds like a propeller. I'm not going to go the whole way through. It's in our best interest to come both directions, especially with this stuff. Could be a little unforgiving and chippy. You can stop and bring a tool rest in. We're still not even close to being round yet. but we're getting there. We definitely have balanced it up a bit. So if you're so minded, you can bring the speed up some more. Hopefully it'll allow us to take a little bit bigger of a bite. Still not there. But it's close. So I'm going to smooth this up here, make it round so I know where I'm going to, or where I'm going to end up at. Put it that way. Rid of the razor blade. So now we're round. Now we'll get rid of the tailstock. Let's see whether I bumped the camera around. Nope, we're good. Really good. Should be good. So now we can come around to the backside, flatten this out, and then we'll be ready to give it some shape. Oh, that was a bit high. Good enough. And I think the last of these, I used the bigger of the jaws. So we'll use that size chuck on it. Not quite to the edge up there, but it's close enough. We'll get rid of the corner. And I should have it before we get carried away. Was 2 inches. I'm going to leave about let's go somewhere around 5/8 to 3/4 down from the top. And we'll go from there. In your tenant. Clean up our tenant. I use my spindle gouge for that. Also make a nice clean cut to the center. Undercut it a little bit. Because this foot will remain in the finished piece. Also means that edge got to come off a little bit, go around. And we will have to, forgot that part. Get rid of this flat area. Something along those lines. That's more than a big enough tenon to hold this piece. They don't have to be giant size. We're gonna make this. I just made a bowl like this, a bowl like the lid, which I thought would come out really neat. Not my idea on this shape. Something I saw actually Matt Monaco do a piece like this, sort of like a pottery kind of a piece. So if I give it a little curve there, I need to cut further. I can do that. Switch back to my spindle gouge. I want to make this a bead. So I can undercut it with the spindle gouge. So we have a little bead. Just knock the corners off basically. We'll come back from the other side. And basically do the same thing. We can leave it as, it's probably easier to leave it as sort of a little bit of a flowing curve up into there rather than a hard stop like it is on the bottom. Because it's much harder, it's really hard to actually get in there and sand well. For the rest of the top, we'll fix that from the top. Make another little cut, the bowl gouge, because it doesn't quite suit my needs. Because it comes up and then sort of tucking into that. So if I take a little bit more off, it should make that more of a pronounced bead. And I can get into that corner with the bowl gouge as well. This particular bowl gouge, this is a 60 degrees straight wings. Did leave some little fuzzies. So we can fix that a little bit. Just yeah, not touch over there though. There we go. Now we took care of that. Hopefully I took care of those lines. And we did. So that's sort of a sandable finish in there. But we can should be able to improve on that a little bit. Because this is one of these projects, and that seems to be a lot of the projects I've been doing of lately is finishing part of it before you ever even move on to the other parts. like on the flat scraper. I go get my point one, which is somewhere. Should have been laying in there. Where? Oh, just slid that. I made too many of these scrapers. I really need to take some time out and redo my drawers. All this stuff sits in a drawer. It has its own little area in some, I think they consider it a foam. This is what we're going to use, a teardrop or pointed scraper. To back the tool rest up a little bit, which seems counterintuitive what you'd want to do. But it has a radius on the bottom of it. And since they're very, very long wings, they go back really far. And we can go in both directions. Because you're removing so little material. As you can see, it's really almost just dust. But it will allow you to get in very, very tight places. And what it's removing is basically dust. I should have got the square one out. Put that down there. I think we can do it with this one as well. This one actually will leave you a nice groove if you wanted so. Well, I can't necessarily do what I would like to do with that. The tool rest up a bit. Shouldn't move the tool rest when the machine's running though. Has a tendency to whack the fingers. See if I can get in here. That would make more sense in that view. Well, that's going to be a pain. I can't get in there where I need to get because of the. I made a new mount for my camera. Made it higher. It's be much easier. Actually, would be easier just to take a couple seconds out. I have more of these collets too. It's just another one of them things of taking the time and the effort to make a couple more handles that have a 5/8 inch collet. So when I go to use these scrapers, I have two other handles, but the handles are like 20 some inches long. Too long for what I want. Nice light touch, should be nice and clean. Make sure we're undercut slightly so that it sits out here on the outside of this rim. The other thing you can do the same thing with this one. Drop the tool rest back down to more of a normal height. You can put this one up on its side too. And basically shear scrape with it. Which should leave us a surface to start no lower than 180 on, something like that. maybe even 220. So just like our lantern, actually I don't have to sand this one yet, because when I flip it around to do the top, once I do the top part, I can grab it a little differently. Surprisingly enough, when I did the woodworm screw, I thought maybe it was going to be a situation of having to get the angle grinder out because I figured they would be really hard steel, but actually had it in a chuck, and I'm like, well, I'll just grab the hacksaw. Well, to my surprise, the hacksaw cut right straight through it very, very easily. So evidently they aren't quite as hard of a steel as what one might think. So if we did our tenon size right, it could have been a shade smaller. That's probably going to leave some teeny tiny little marks in there. It needs to be about a 16th of an inch, maybe a little less, because I think right there that's going to leave a mark. Yeah, left two. Once again, it's another one of them scenarios of I want the grain running up and down with jaws as well. It's going to leave a mark that most people would not notice. Another wood turner will notice, of course, because they would look for it. At least I would. So we got to clean up this face. We changed something there, so I slowed the speed way down. Started back up. Bring it up to the speed that we want. Just for right now, all we're going to do is clean up this outside edge and flip around and go right towards the center. Being mindful of that hole, and now we're good for that. Now I have to go get my little cup because I don't remember what would be nice to actually have remembered that and brought the other one. I did make one of this lady before. So what I had determined is kind of the pain of making these. So we're back to our 1 3/8. We want to go down about less. You probably only want to go down about 3/4 of an inch, maybe. I think the first one or two of these that I made for her, well, actually I haven't given her any of them, but I didn't drill a hole. I didn't drill a hole down through the center, which ended up made it more work. So I determined if I can get that center part, we want to go down 3/4. So if I just use the scale on the lathe itself, drop our speed way back, then we'll go down about 3/4 of an inch. Something like that. As we knock the camera loose, no, too bad. Let's see if we got down to 3/4. We're down to about 5/8, but that also leaves a giant size hole in the bottom of it. where the tip of the drill bit is. So that was kind of the other thing that was drilling the hole. Actually, in some ways, makes you some more work. Let's just grab a big handle. So in order to get that out down there, you need something sort of square. So I use a square end scraper. So the rest comes up a bit. And really what I'm after now is just to get to the bottom of that hole. And we didn't get high enough. Which is somewhere about there. Close to it. Still a little bit of it left, but we got a lot more sort of messing about with this. This thing was about 2 1/4, but there's this little rim, so we're doing 2 1/8. If it would have been smarter than the average bear, I would have done that before I did the other things. But we'll just set dividers to it, and we'll get more than close enough. So if we set them at about 2 1/8. Somewhere thereabouts. We have two choices there. That I could do it with the scraper, but we also can do it with the bowl gouge. Probably a little easier and a little bit cleaner of a cut. We're just going in on this angle. Something like that. We also could have dished this out a little bit before that, but a main part right now is to get this to fit down in there. And you can see we got to go another 1/4 of an inch deeper, or at least make it go out a little further. I think I'm going to go switch back to my square scraper and take more of that out. We high enough? No. This is one of the places it would be nice to figure out some simpler way of doing them. It's it's kind of like a feel thing that it's grabbing a hold of it down there somewhere. The scraper does not do do really the greatest job as far as leaves a bunch of disturbed grain, torn grain. You need to use a bowl gouge, or in this case I just picked up the spindle gouge, because it'll do the same thing, leaving a nice clean cut. Right into that corner. Now we're getting much closer. Can't really tell whether it's bottoming out at the bottom. I don't think it is. It could be. So I'll just expand the top a little bit more. There we go. So we're going to need to clean up the bottom a little bit. Also marking this area up here. I probably wouldn't have to do this. I just thought it gave a nicer detail, because if you don't have this right down in here, which is a very good possibility they won't get it right, that way when it sits up underneath this little rim, it'll sit down in there. Another one of them scenarios of you as the turner involved, you would be the only one that knows that that situation exists. We'll go back to our square end scraper. We'll cut this down just a little bit. Only wants to be about a 1/16 of an inch deep, something like that. And now definitely are sitting on the bottom. So I can clean up the very bottom. Stay away from the sides and just clean up the bottom. Take a little extra out of the middle. Go over to the side. So that's kind of not a very nice place to go in there and sand. And now we got some. See what we're going to do. We're going to take a little more off here first. Right into that corner again. And get quite into the corner. There we go. I'd rather leave that tiny little ridge around there. I'll probably end up having to take it off anyhow. Now our cup sits down in pretty much flush, close to flush. Doesn't really wiggle around, so we've done something very much right and good. Although our bottom down here, not quite what I want it to look like. So the scraper that I used earlier for the lantern is another really good choice for that because of the corner being over there. I can go into that corner and go across, sort of drag across. And the tool rest's going to come up. It is a traditional scraper. It needs to be at a little bit of a downward angle, preferably without knocking the camera silly. Right into that corner. And doesn't want to come up into the center. I really would like, although that center does feel like it's okay.
So one more little test fit. Everything still fits. It doesn't wiggle around, which is what I'm after. It has a little wiggle to it, but a little wiggle is not going to hurt anything because it is a piece of wood. So it's going to move over the seasons. So in this case, when it moves, I think it would just take and just sort of push that cup out, would be my thought. So I think we'll just give this a little bit of a, but really, you got to watch because there again, I went down. I mean, we started out with 2 inches thick, less than 2 inches, and we've gone down there. I'm only down about 1.25 inches. So I mean, there is a fair amount of meat below that we could sink it down further yet.
I just don't really necessarily feel there's a giant size need for it. So if we make this into a bit of a cove, a little bit of a cove, going downhill all the time. Not sure why I picked up that one to do that. I want the one, this one that's ground back on with the straight wings only has about 1/8 of an inch of bevel contact surface, which will allow it to turn a very, very tight corner, for one. And number two, let's route that down a little bit. It'll cut very, very cleanly that way. So we don't want to cut uphill. Just like rolling a bead on a piece of spindle work, we want to finish in the middle, a little bit each direction. Get rid of our razor blade edge, which will sand off. Leave that one sort of square. See what we look, we left a fuzzy in the middle. So we definitely want to go back after that. That actually left a little ridge there. This stuff is very chippy. I shouldn't touch that edge with that tool like that. It actually chipped it. So which way is it going from the inside? A little more difficult to chase that center little bit in there versus what you would do with the spindle type work. Maybe I should just use the spindle gouge. It might make it easier. I doubt it though. I'll make it worse. There we go. Now instead of touching that edge, I'll use the wing and slice it back. Round it over a little bit. Nice and gentle. Now it's not all chipped up. Still have a little bit of a definite difference in the center, but I think that'll look all right. So I think we're ready to give it a bit of a sand in there. And this is a little over 2¼ This will probably screw me up. It will. This is where the shark jaws come in, but I'll be able to do it with the small jaws and I'll expand out there to be able to sand this back. If it leaves tiny little marks, it leaves tiny little marks, but it won't, once again, it's not going to leave very big marks. I was so minded, really worried about it. I would just change back over to the shark jaws. That's where drilling the hole when I start one of these is actually an easier thing to do because I use the shark jaws for that, which are a little bit bigger than the other jaws were. The standard jaws, put it that way. So now we get to sand. And we should actually be able to power sand most of that. Except I will have to switch heads. And is it worth switching pads? Let's look at it once. That's 180. Get rid of any of the fuzzies down that side. I'll switch it over and spin it in reverse. For me, it's easier to stand up here than it is down underneath. Does a better job dust collection wise too. It's definitely going to leave that like almost like a transition line down there, but kind of gives it another, gives it another little dimension, little tiny little bit of a detail. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Making sure we hit any of those little edges in there that could be sharp. So that's through 400, which is enough for something like this. Now there's a little bit of, always got to have that one little place. Just a little place where the grain wants to stand up. It's not even really end grain. Well, maybe it's a little bit of end grain, a little bit of mixed grain. So a little bit of fine tuning. But it's funny you should ask. Um, the Ikebana, this is really what she told us. Her husband used to be very active in our club. He actually passed away a couple years ago. Somehow or another, she got involved. The Ikebana is one of those Japanese things where that little metal cup will get some little, I think, some little itty bitty flowers or something in there. So, I mean, they're going to put water in that cup, but that cup sits in there and they put some, this is my understanding of it, they put some sort of little flowers or little plants in there that would grow out, and cover this edge up or whatever. But that will hold water. So I was told. And she wants to he was an eye surgeon, was his profession. And I don't know where she come up with this thing at, but she came to our club and asked if we would, she's given us the cups to make them and asked if we would make a bunch of these to give away as something. I can't even really totally answer you what she's giving them away for. I'm sure it had something to do with the eye surgery kind of world. And now we get to the outside, we can stand the easier way as far as I'm concerned. But but I hope I answered your question, Billy. Other than that, I would say you kind of like maybe give it a little shot on Google and ask them what it's actually used for. I know it's I know it's kind of one of those Japanese things, probably along the same lines as those little like bonsai trees or something like that. I don't think that's what they put in these, but I don't. She really didn't. She showed us some pictures, but it didn't really necessarily make sense to me. And I should just up and sand off all this. Right, but you were asking what, and I don't remember. I'm pretty sure she said that the metal cup was because the flowers in the center would actually be living flowers, not artificial flowers or something along those lines. I would assume the ones on the like that would sit around it on the outside maybe are some sort of artificial or dried flowers or something along those lines. But whatever she was going, I like I say I don't really remember what she was, what or why she was wanted to do this donation to this outfit or people or whatever it was, whatever the case was. But she wanted to have in a neighborhood of 150 of these before she ever opened her mouth to start donating them to whatever cause. And I don't think she's even getting. She went to a couple of the other. There's like two other local clubs to us, to me, and the one other club. I think they made her about 40 or 50 of them so far. The club that I'm involved in, there was only been a handful of them made. The other club, the one guy has I guess he's sort of into doing some 3D printing. So rather than the metal cup, he did a 3D printed cup. That's the lifted up grain there too. And of course, his idea of the 3D printed cup it's not tapered, it's straight. So he felt it was going to make it really much easier for anybody to make, because you could just drill a straight up, like 2¼ inch straight drill. At least that's his thought, and that's the ones that she had with her from down there. That's what those guys were doing. They were just, they were trying to make it super simple. Which I myself did not particularly. I didn't care for it, and at the last month at our meeting, she showed up at the very end, and I asked her, I'm like, did you not say that you had like a couple hundred of them, those little metal cups that you bought? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, well, these guys from Lancaster want to make this super simple that they don't have to deal with that. It's like, I have the cups. I said, then I'm going to continue making them the way you ask with the metal cups. I think they look nicer. I mean, a 3D printed cup, to me, not much into the 3D printing world, but I think the metal cup makes them look nicer. and she has them, so that's what she's going to get out of me. Because the 3 is the ones for the metal cups. So they're fairly simple to make. I mean, it hasn't taken us a ton of time. And we'll just give it a finish while we're at it. And it'll be done and ready to hit the buffing wheel tomorrow. Once again, we have another place where we have a little crack in there. So a little bit running around, let gravity do its thing. And these things, since there's a lot of mass to them, I mean, even though this thing is only, I think the actual dimensions are somewhere, I think it said it was like between 5 and 5.5 inches diameter wise. So I mean, it's not small. I mean, it is fairly small, but in the same token, I mean, it's I want to say it's kind of heavy in a way. I mean, a lot heavier of basically a bowl that I could make because of the mass that you're leaving behind. But what they're going to use it for, the mass that you leave behind is probably going to be very beneficial to them. So that's our finish. One coating done. I would for the outside. Wipe off the excess. Whole time you're wiping the excess off, you're smearing it around. You'll get dirt off of it. Be careful what you're doing with that hand edge. I should really use 2 gloves. Very seldom ever do. But I know the point of something when it makes contact with my hand. Don't leave your hand sit there too long because there's moisture in your hand. Moisture will make super glue set up fast. Very fast. Not the prettiest kind of wood in the world, but I mean, it has a little bit of character. It's got some light and dark spots in it. And, the price is right to her, so that she can't be, well, the old statement, beggars can't be choosy. So I've gripped inside that little rim. It's a very secure way to do it for something like that. You can see I was able to sand everything. It did not, put it this way, I cannot see any lines. These are dovetail jaws, so it's just a teeny tiny little line that's going right into that corner. So it's a strong grip, also a grip that doesn't leave marks. Thank you for the follow there on Twitch. So we'll put it back in these jaws. Before I put it back in there, show you the one other little secretive kind of a trick. Because we know super glue will stick to everything, and it would stick to metal without any problems whatsoever. So if I take a little bit of, this just so happens to be a microcrystalline wax. If I take that wax, coat the jaws on the outside, inside, with the wax, put the can away, let that set up a little bit, and then we'll go back and wipe them off. Gets nice and it'll get the dirt off of them too. Help to get the dirt off of them. I really didn't necessarily need to do the outside edge. It's more this inside edge, but just as easy to do the whole thing. So now it won't stick fast because this is still definitely, if you squeezed it or would spin that up to speed, there's definitely super glue in there that has not set up yet. So just a little light touch, tighten it up because we're no longer going to do any turning. We're just putting finish on. And then we'll use a little piece of polyester felt. Makes a little pad in there to make it a little less, make it less messy. Gives it a little reservoir. Because I do put quite a bit on in that pad. I mean, this being thick, it's probably not going to make a difference. Usually when you're putting it on a normal bowl thing, inside it's going to take a whole lot less than the outside. Or whichever side you do second, put it that way. Whether you do the outside first or the inside first, whichever one would be second. Same scenario with any of the other beads that we did. Just as easy type to run the glue in there. Now when I do this top rim, I want to be a little bit cautious, a little bit careful. I probably will have to sand a little bit come tomorrow. Because this particular super glue, unlike most super glues people would use or know about, it does not like to go over top of it. It will not go over top of itself. Not saying like it. It will not go over top of itself. And whatever little bits that I got up over that rim now probably has already set up and dried, or at least started to. So when I go to wipe it off, I won't be able to wipe it off. It'll leave a little bit of a ridge behind up there. A little bit of 800 grit sandpaper takes the ridge away. You buff it and away it goes. It's not really that big of an issue. Just need to put it on plenty thick from the start so it absorbs into the grain of the wood. And that's that. Guess I shouldn't have finished off the very bottom because I didn't sign it, but oh well. Pyrography pen will actually still sign that on the bottom. So that's a Ricky Bana. So there's one of our pieces. Well, I'll show you the other one. That's going to be it for us, for me tonight. So there's our two pieces that we got done this evening. Make more sense. That one in there. It's our little ornament lantern and our Ikebana little bowl for the whatever flowers it is they put in it. I hope that she will actually give us some pictures maybe of what these look like when they finish them up. Would be nice. So they can just sit around and dry till tomorrow. I mean, they're already dry to the touch, but tomorrow then we'll buff them using a buffing wheel with the the Bonnex compound on it. Or if you don't have that, you can use white diamond. You can use um, you can use some of the abrasive paste on them on this stuff. I actually have a bowl that needs to be finished on the bottom. Same scenario. For whatever reason, I actually put the finish on the inside. I normally don't do it that way. This needs a little bit more sanding to do around the foot area. This one also left some marks because of the chuck. So they need to be removed, finished sanding that, and then the bottom that's ready to be finished. And that's a little piece of cherry. But lots of little pieces, especially this time of year. For me,
anyhow, they're kind of driving me nuts with. Normally, I only do tops at the farm show that we go and attend as a wood turning group, and that is not till January. But somewhere on social media, somebody posted a while back that they make tops year round, and when they go to the craft shows, they're like, you're not going to get rich making tops, but everybody likes them, and a lot of people will buy them. So we did a craft show about 2 weeks ago, I guess it was now. I took a dozen of them by about 12 or 1 o'clock. They were all gone. I don't know that I would have sold any more. We're also doing um, we're in a consignment, craft consignment store. And I sold another half a dozen or so in there. So that's been keeping me entertained and busy. And also trying to get better at using the Sorby texturing tools. So it's been helpful. But anybody have any questions, comments? Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up and go have a adult beverage or two. Okay, thank you for the follow. I think that's what that was. It's been so long since I've done much on with Twitch. If I remember correctly, that was a follow, I think. Okay. Otherwise, Sunday's going to be, I think Sunday's now going to be the night where I do this. I was doing Saturdays, but Saturday seems to be a little bit troublesome anymore to be able to do his live stream. So I told my wife, I said, I think we'll do it on Sundays because generally Sundays we're home and I don't, I teach classes on Saturday, so once a month I wouldn't be able to do it anyhow. But I think we're going to switch to Sundays at around 6 o'clock Eastern time. So if you like what you see, stop back and visit. If you're watching it on YouTube, if you could hit that trusty little subscribe button, that would be wonderful. Otherwise, everybody have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week.